Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 99. Oh my gosh, we're almost to 100. 99 of Teaching Tales, the podcast totally devoted to sharing stories from the world of education. As always, I am your host, Brent Coley, an elementary principal in beautiful Southern California. And ladies and gentlemen listening, we've got not one, but two special guests tonight. I've got Solomon Petchers and Mike Earnshaw. Sol and Mike, how are you guys?
Doing great. How are you guys?
Doing all right, Brent.
Fantastic. Now, I don't remember the numbers, but both of you guys have been, Mike more recently, Solomon, I think a little bit before that. You've both been a guest before, but for anyone who didn't listen to those and doesn't know who these people are, Solomon, tell us a little, just real briefly, who is Solomon Petchers?
I am a dad, a teacher, living in Southern California. I've been in education now 25 years and recently realized my dream of writing and publishing a few books.
There we go. All right. And Mike?
Yeah, I'm a dad of two, husband, elementary school principal, co-host of the Punk Rock Classrooms podcast, and author of the EduCulture Cookbook.
All right. So, yes. So we have three published authors, Solomon, Mike, and myself on this. And let me, no, we're not taking a phone call right now. And see, this is real. We're just moving. We're going live. The purpose of the inspiration from this podcast, for anyone listening, came from a blog post that Mike very recently wrote called, "So You Want to Write a Book?" Or "So You're Thinking About Writing a Book." And I read it and I was like, oh, like that needs to be a podcast episode, because I absolutely loved, Mike, how you basically shared some of your experience of how that worked in terms of your process of writing the book. And I thought, and I think one of the big goals of that was, if you're thinking of writing a book, if you think you have something to share with somebody, you need to do that. So my goal in this episode is, hey, let's get Mike, let's get Solomon, myself as well, and let's kind of share our processes of how we wrote a book to hopefully let anyone know, because I think there's I've talked to multiple people out there who have thought about, oh, it'd be really cool to write a book someday, but have thought like, but I'm not Stephen King, or I'm not James Patterson, or something like I'll never be able to do it. And that's just not true anymore. Publishing is doable now for anybody. So let's just start. I want to go through, I'll start. Saul, when did you first know you wanted to write a book?
Man, I was going to be 51 tomorrow. So
happy birthday.
in my 20s, I was sick early on in my life, probably in my 17, 18, 19. I started writing just for fun. And in my mid 20s, I finished writing Ghost in the Attic. And I was like, oh, kind of like what you're saying, like I'm not a Stephen King, so I'm never going to publish it. And it just sat in my computer. And then I had to print it out and just sat in a box for the longest time. And so I always knew I wanted to publish a book. It's the idea of that imposter syndrome and confidence it always creeps in. So, yeah.
Mike, what about you? When did the idea sprout?
It was pretty early on. I'd say I was probably in high school. I always was drawn to ELA, majored, as an English teacher before I became a principal. And I always wrote poetry, and I never really shared with anybody. It was more for myself, and a few people get to see it. And but just recently, within the past year, I started sharing it on our website. But I think it was early on when I kind of said I want to write a book. But my goal was always to write, a fiction book. I wanted to be a fiction writer, which my book is totally not a fiction book. But there's a whole back story of why it came out the way it did. So.
Yeah. Well, Mike, you and me, my story parallels yours. Always, it was a bucket list thing. I always wanted to write a book. I just thought it would be fiction. And it also parallels Solomon, that I started writing a children's story about 20 years ago and finished it. And it sat on a hard drive somewhere and didn't get touched. And in a couple of months, it is going to be published, but that's
so cool.
Another story for another time. So so my next question would be, so Solomon, early on, both of you kind of early on, all three of us early on, we knew we wanted to. How did you start? Like where and when did you do your writing?
Oh gosh, with is it me? Right?
Yeah.
When most of my writing, I put this on my Instagram quite often, is I'm usually sitting in my car waiting for my daughter to get out of dance class. So that's usually what it is. So for me, and that's the hardest part, is stealing away minutes, just trying to just seize a few minutes here, a few minutes there. It's almost good that I'm ADHD, because I can work in pockets, work in just short time frames and move on there. So, that whole process of when and where, it's whenever I can and whenever the mood hits.
Yeah. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite. I mean, I've talked to a lot of other authors, and they have their thing where they set away a weekend, or they're setting away certain time in the morning. For me, it's pretty much at night. I mean, my son's 13, my daughter's 10. So by the time I get done with all of their sports and whatnot, my wife and I'll sit on the couch, and honestly, a lot of my writing comes from when there's a new show or series that she really wants to watch, and I don't really have any interest in it. So I'm like, oh yeah, we could totally watch that. And then I'm able to kind of block out the distractions, and I just sit there and write. And once in a while, kind of like what Sal was saying, when I'm waiting for my kids, I'll grab my phone, and not ideal to write on your phone, but if I get that idea, I can throw it there. But most of it's in the evening, late hours. So
yeah, no, I will do a little of both. Sometimes I would write for Stories of Edu Influence. My book, I would write a couple hours on the weekend. Usually it was on the weekends, because during the week I'm whooped. I mean, I'm getting home.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything left. So, but I vividly remember, like you said, Solomon, waiting for dance class to get over. I remember doing some on my phone at my son's hockey practice, walking around the rink on my phone. Ooh, an idea came, and it was a few sentences. I remember mowing the lawn, mowing I was writing, maybe not physically, but literally mowing the lawn, and a line coming. It's like, oh my gosh, stopped, turned the thing on, and just jotted down those notes that I could copy and paste into the manuscript a little bit later. And for anyone listening, you just heard 3 different stories, 3 different answers. I think the moral of this story is there isn't necessarily an answer. Whatever's going to work for you is going to work for you. So, how long, I'm going to start with Mike on this one, because Solomon, you've got multiple ones. So Mike, how long did it take you to write your book?
Well, it took a little longer than I anticipated, because I was.
And when I say write, I mean not publishing from start,
just
but
get your draft done.
To get your
manuscript done. Yeah. So for me to get the manuscript done, it was probably. I started. It was a little bit before the pandemic hit, and I just was cranking out, like a chapter a night. I do a chapter, then I would do my edits the next night, then I'd do it. Another idea would pop and do a chapter, and then the pandemic hit, and literally, everything in life paused, right? I'm now at home with my wife and 2 kids all day long. And it's just at the end of the night, I'm like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to look at a computer anymore, because I've been on Zoom meetings all day. So, then I would start kind of forcing myself, all right, you got to do something, Mike. I try to get a chapter done a week. And then when the pandemic was going on longer than we anticipated, I started second guessing myself, because I'm like, everything I'm writing about in my book is things we've done as a staff pre-pandemic, when we're on top of each other, we're hands-on, and I'm starting to think, is this even going to be relevant? I talked to I remember reaching out to Mandy and Sarah from EduMatch, and I said, hey, look, I don't know what we should do. And Mandy, if it wasn't for her, she told me, she goes, things will get better. Yeah. This is not going to be forever. Your book's going to make a difference. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Keep writing. And then when she said that, and I remember reaching out to Dave Schmittou, and he said, don't worry. It's when you got to get it done, you're going to get it done. And then just kind of their advice. And I said, you know what, let's just do it. And then I got back in that groove. So
there we go.
Mike, let me ask you a question. Were you was there a deadline from the publisher?
So there was, but it was pretty loose. I had not yet picked they had given me, when we had met, and they had said, hey, look, we take so many submissions of your final manuscript a month. And when they gave me my months, I remember like June was one of them. And then I think I picked like October of 2019, right? Because my book just came out in September of 21. No, so I picked September or October of 2020 to have it done. I remember thinking, I'm like, all right, I fell out of my groove. I'm going to pick the latest month possible right now to give me some window, as much as I wanted that June date. But we were still, heck, we're still in this pandemic teaching, but yeah. I was like, let me give myself a little window. So, but they were real flexible. They told me, look, if you need more time, it's going to push back publication.
Yeah.
If you're okay with that. But I'm like, yeah. So
you you and I, Mike, we published through Edge and Match Publishing.
Yeah.
Great experience. Sarah and Mandy, fantastic.
Yeah,
so
great.
There were some deadlines there.
Yeah.
Solomon, your deadlines were probably more self-imposed because you self-published, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was it's kind of a double-edged sword. Yeah, I can set my own time, but then if I know if I don't have an end in mind, I don't have to finish. So
yeah. How long? Like my book, I started in January of I don't even remember, 2018, I think, and I finished in October. That was, so I was a little slower with everything going on. It was more like if I could get a chapter every 3 or 4 weeks, but my writing style too is I would write a draft, I would finish that chapter, and I would do a lot of editing that, like, when my chapter was done, it was done. Not done to an editor or something, but it was pretty solid when it was done. Now, Solomon, you started Ghost in the Attic.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
Yeah, a long time. I've written it originally in third person. And so when I pulled it out of the box, I gave it to someone. They said, this would be great if it was first person. So I rewrote the whole thing in first person. And that took me about 4 months to do. And then while that was being published and processed and I was waiting for my cover, I wrote Feasters, the first Feasters, Apocalyptic Tale. I wrote that in probably 8 months or so. And again, no deadline. And then I turned out the third one in the next year. So, but I think I had it written in probably 8 or 9 months.
Okay.
Roughly.
So
nice.
Again,
it takes time.
And it's going to be different for everyone. I heard a story somewhere. I don't know the accuracy, but I heard that George Couros, who wrote The Innovator's Mindset, I want to say I heard he wrote that like in a couple of weeks.
That book is so long. It's huge.
So please, if anyone, George, if you're listening, you can tweet me. I don't know if that's true, but it's like, wow. I know that some people crank out material. It's just they get on a roll, they go up to a cabin somewhere and they crank it out. Again, that would be nice, but that wasn't necessarily our stories. So, Mike, you and I have a publisher. So if someone's writing something and they want to seek out a publisher, we used Edge and Match. How did you do that? Again, just not the whole story because that'll take too long, but how did you connect with a publisher?
Yeah. So basically, I had met Kristen Nan. I presented at Teach Better 19, the first Teach Better conference, the only one I've had at this point, Teach Better 19 in Ohio. And Kristen was in my session and we just connected afterwards. She said she loved my presentation, my approach to education, all that. And then, so I kept in contact with her, and it was a few months after that. It was like January of 2020 when I kind of said, hey, I'm writing this book. I got an idea for a book. And I legit had maybe a chapter 2. And she's like, oh my God, I love this cookbook idea. And next thing I know, I'm in a Voxer conversation with her and Sarah, of EduMatch. And she's like, Kristen just goes, all right, I'm gonna let you guys two talk. And then she left the chat. And Sarah's like, so you got an idea? I'm like, yep. And then, it just kind of went from there.
Yeah. I know that I reached out to Sarah, and they've got a submission process now. If you go to edumatchpublishing.com, they have it. If you're thinking about, you've got an educational idea for a book, they have a submission process. I know that she was on the podcast before I had written the book, and I reached out to her and said, hey, I'm writing a book. I have some ideas. And she gave me the information to submit it. I submitted it, and they accepted it, thankfully. And then I continued. It wasn't done yet. I had I don't know about you, I had about 4 or 5 chapters done. It was about halfway done when I submitted it, and then it was accepted, and then I finished the rest of the book. Was yours about that?
Mine was, I think I had less than that. I think I had maybe 3, because I tried telling Kristen, I was like, hey, hold up. I just started this book. And then, but Sarah's like, I'm really intrigued with this idea. Submit what you have. She goes, don't worry if it's only, a couple chapters. I submitted it. And then she said, like, I love it. Let's move forward. And then that's, just kind of wrote it from there.
Yeah. And now for everyone listening, thinking like, ooh, I don't know who Sarah is. I don't know who Mandy is. I don't know. I don't know these people.
I have a Sarah.
Exactly. Or I don't have a Sarah. Or it's not an educational book. Because I know, like Mike and we've written nonfiction. I'm currently writing some fiction, but Solomon, his 3 books are fiction. And they're really good, by the way. But we'll get to that later. So Solomon, your process, you didn't have a publisher. Tell us how you published.
A lot of research on how to get published. The game right now to get a publisher, you have to get an agent first, and then an agent will shop for a publisher. And it's just too many. For me, when I looked at the steps, it was just too many steps at this point.
Yeah.
When I could just be all of it. And that was the key thing, was I could do all of it. And so research, I looked up KDP on Amazon, which makes it so easy to upload books, and they have their formatting, but so easy to do that, and Barnes and Noble as well. And now that this indie industry has grown, it's just, there's so many more formats out there. There's Ingram Spark, there's Drafted Digital, so lots of options for you. And so I had to just do the research, and I connected with some authors online, and just listened to what they did, and I kind of just copied it.
Yeah. And I would, as somebody like Mike, you and I have gone with EduMatch. Solomon, you've done just independent. I'm now in the middle of both. Like, I did the publisher, but now I'm doing my children's book through KDP, through Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. And Solomon, you and I have had lunch more than once. I've been picking your brain. I'm like, so tell me how you did this. Tell me how you did this. And we're supposed to be next week too. Thank you again for that, my friend. It's for anyone who's got something, Solomon, you're right. It's the Amazon makes it pretty easy to do.
Very easy.
I mean, they've got templates, they've got videos, they've got
everything you need. Yeah. Everything you need. And it really is, the hardest part, the hardest part is, how do I get people to do all of that stuff?
Yeah.
And I think I told you I had Avery Poznansky. She did all my editing for all 3 of my books. She's a former student of mine who's now at UCLA.
Nice.
I paid her while she was in high school to edit my books, and then went through a different process. I had beta readers actually who were willing to edit it as well. So you find help where it is, and using Fiverr for book covers and formatting. Formatting is a big thing. Probably I try to do it myself, and it is just it is a beast. So I just defer to the experts.
Yeah. But nice with Fiverr out there, you've got independent contractors who, Mike, I don't know about, my cover for EduMatch was Fiverr that Sarah contracted. I think they contracted out through that. So I think, to your point, Solomon, it is work. You do have to research and stuff, but if you're willing to do that, it is doable. And I'm learning that right now with it's an illustrated children's book that I'm having to format it myself. I'm working with an illustrator that I had to find, that I'm having to pay, that I'm like, all the stuff that your publisher will do for you, that EduMatch, that Sarah and Mandy, right, Mike? Like we gave them the manuscript, and she.
Right. I mean, they formatted it and they sent it back. And there was a few, like the first two, I said, I don't really like this formatting. And then, you get your input, but
yeah,
same with the cover. I gave them my idea, and then they had the illustrator or whatever create it. And there's a few covers we went back and forth on.
Yeah. They do the heavy lifting. They find the illustrator. They did the editor. They paid. I mean, that was part of the process. And on the back end, now your publisher is going to get a cut of the profits. So
exactly.
So, but in terms of out of pocket expenses, where the publisher, they weren't. I mean, they do all of that. Whereas now, Saul, you had an editor that you were able to use, and you paid her. Yeah. Or, I mean, you had to pay the Fiverr person, but again, you have complete control over that. So it's kind of like, what are you looking to do? Are you willing to put in the work? If you are, I think my nephew, he's I think he's like 28 right now. He just published something through Amazon. Now it's a very simple book, but he can say he's published something. I mean, I could go to Amazon right now, type in his name, and his book is there. Mm-hmm. You can buy. I mean, it's that simple to do, and through Amazon, there aren't the upfront costs.
No, right? It's really nice. I mean, it's if you wanted to do it for free, you could do it. I mean, the resources to edit your own book, which I highly do not recommend people do, because you need fresh eyes on it. The cover right now, BookBrush now offers a way to do your own cover, and it's fantastic. Yes. I mean, it's so easy. Fiverr, you could just throw, if you want to throw a couple bucks at it, but you could do it all for free if you really wanted to. I mean, but over time, you're going to want to turn out quality, and sometimes if you're layman, it's not going to, not going to result there.
But there's a Kindle's book cover creator they have there. Yeah. I'm thinking we've got one of our fifth grade teachers, who every year he has the students and they do a collective story where like they brainstorm the idea, they brainstorm the plot, and every chapter is written by a different student. It's that progressive story, and he publishes it at the end of the year. And cool. And he's not gone through it. He's gone through another, but it was
there's lots out there now.
It was now I'm thinking he could go through Amazon to do this because it's not complex. He's got he could just nice and simple, throw it up there. And then you could say, oh, parents, you want to buy a copy of this? Then go on Amazon and have it prime shipped to them. I mean, it's pretty.
That's really cool.
Pretty amazing. So
you set your price, you set your everything on it. So it's really nice. And I mean, there's formatting, and there's some things that they want very specific, but it's free. I mean, Ingram Spark, they'll charge you every time you upload a manuscript. Well, why am I going to do that when I'm going to do it for free on Barnes & Noble will fix your mistakes for you, which is really nice. Amazon will tell you where your mistakes are and suggest fixes. I mean, it's an easy, cuts out the middleman.
Yeah. So the last question that I had down, or maybe it's a statement because there's no question mark at the end of it. There's the writer in me. What's your advice? And we could talk for another hour on this. So for anyone listening right now who is intrigued by the title of this episode that says, so you're thinking about writing a book, for that person is like, yeah, I am thinking about writing a book. I do think I have something to share. Maybe it's fiction like Solomon. Maybe it's a story. Mike, maybe it's like you and me. Maybe it's something, maybe it's nonfiction, something in the educational realm or any other realm. This is typically, it's educators who are listening to this. What would be one or two quick pieces of advice that you would give?
Want to take that, Mike?
That's a loaded question.
It's a big one.
I think back to the blog that, Brent, you said kind of sparked your interest to do this episode. And people have been retweeting the one sentence in there, like, don't ever think your voice, or you don't have something to say. I don't even remember what I wrote, at this point, but like, don't ever think like your voice doesn't matter. Like, don't ever think you don't have something to say, because all of us have a story to tell, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, it doesn't matter. Poetry, a song in us, we all have something to share. And I think if you want to put it out there, because let's face it, like putting yourself out there with a book it's vulnerable.
Terrifying.
I mean, it's
Terrifying. Yes.
Every time someone tweets me or texts me and says, "Hey, I just got your book," at first I'm like, "All right, awesome, thank you." Then I'm like, what are they going to think?
Yeah.
But I think a question I would get a lot is, did you ever feel imposter syndrome when you were writing this? And no, like, you just, if you have something to say, like, you got to have that passion to want to share that and put it out there. And then I also would just say, don't like rush it. Meaning, like, you can't just sit back and, like, you can sit back and take years to write something, if that's what fits your timeline. But I've seen too many people put too many very strict deadlines on themselves. Like, I need to have this done by this date, and life happens. I mean, you can't beat yourself up and then try to just muscle through it to be done by that date, because you're not going to have something that's quality that you really believe in. So I guess that's my two biggest things: is know your voice matters, and don't beat yourself up if you're not meeting your own timelines.
I like it.
Yeah, I have a lot. I mean, a lot of people tell me this. Brent, you touched on it. Yeah, I want to write a book. But I don't know how. And nothing gets written if you don't just do it. It's
Right.
kind of like that basketball analogy where you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so I think you have to really, if you have a story to tell, like you said, Mike, a story to tell. We all have unique experiences. You can turn that into a book. And for me, imposter syndrome is like it is a big time thing. I even wrote a blog, convinced myself in the blog post that I'm overcoming it, and then it creeps up. Every time it's like this. It's just right here. It's just right here. And I think you have to be able to work through that. And that's the biggest piece, is that what you have to write or what you want to say is worthy of a story or something, if it's fiction or nonfiction, whatever it may be. But your experiences are unique. And if you feel that people need to hear them, then you need to shout them.
Yeah. I love what you guys have said. I mean, I think write it. My advice would be start writing, because don't worry about the publishing. Don't worry about who's my publisher, who's my agent. Am I going to do Amazon? You got to write it first.
Yeah.
No
one's going to read it. No one's going to read it
if you don't write it.
Exactly.
And I would just echo what both of you said. I mean, it's like the last chapter. One of the last chapters in my book is, you don't have to be Stephen King. You don't have to be a New York Times bestseller. If what you're writing is going to make a difference in the lives of even one person, I mean, like for me, then it's worth it. Because I haven't quit my day job. Mike, you haven't quit your day job. Saul, you haven't. I mean, none of us have quit we didn't write books to get rich and famous and quit our day jobs. I wrote my book because I wanted to encourage other educators. Mike, that's what you try to do. And Solomon, you're looking to entertain people. And
there's always a message. And there's always a message.
And there's a message
kids can walk away with, or kids and adults just walk away with. Whether the blood and gore of a zombie apocalypse is there's still a message in there for people.
Exactly. You've got a message. And with my children's book, it is like, I want to entertain. I want it to be a nice story with some cool pictures, but there's a definite message underlying that. So yeah, I would say write it, and just echo what you two said, that you do not have to be a bestseller. It does not have to sell tens of thousands of copies.
Right.
Because frankly, I'm not going to sell that.
If that's your goal, if notoriety and fortune is your goal, then you're probably not going into it
with the right
mentality.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I for me, for my stories of edu influence, I wrote, I was able, like you said, Mike, you spoke at a conference and you talked with Kristen. She's like, "Oh, I really like what you," I mean,
right.
That's very similar to mine. I had the opportunity to keynote a couple of conferences and I talked about the topics and it was well received. And after the second one, I was like, if I wrote this down, I could probably reach more people, not just the people who were in the room here.
Right.
And that was the impetus for it. It's just like, hey, let's write it down. Let's put it out there. Let's see what people think. And again, still got my day job, and that's okay.
Right.
I wasn't looking to quit my day job. I was looking to encourage people. So, all right. So at the end, Mike, tell us about your book and where they can find it.
Yeah. So my book, The Edu Culture Cookbook, it's all about, it's things that I have done with our staff and things we've done as an entire staff and things I've done with the students to just build a positive school and classroom culture. You know, the book's for anybody in education, because the things that when I implement them, my goal is the teachers I have with me will take it back to their students to improve their classroom culture. Then the reason it's called the cookbook is because at the end of each chapter, because, you know, we read these educational books and 6 months down the road, we're like, oh, I remember reading that, but you can't find your highlights and your Post-its. So there's a recipe card at the back that just summarizes, and then there's a QR code even. You could put it on your phone, and that's a whole nother episode, the whole story. I mean, I almost went to culinary school instead of education, and the whole story of how we came up with the cookbook with my wife. But so yeah, you can get it at it's on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, EduMatch's website. I've got a link on our punkrockclassrooms.com website where you can go through there, and I'll bring you to Amazon. But yeah, check it out, pick it up.
And
what do you think?
And if somebody wants to follow you on Twitter, they can get you
at Mike R. Earnshaw, and it's the same on Instagram. And then you can also follow at Punk Classrooms. That's the podcast handle. Yeah,
and I will give an endorsement recommendation for the Educulture Cookbook. It's awesome.
Thank
practical.
You, thank you.
Practical things. It's real. Very good, and enjoy the podcast. Enjoy the podcast as well. So,
thank you,
Solomon. Your books.
Mike, I'm looking forward to getting that book for sure. Yeah. So my first
picking
book,
yours up.
Yeah. Thank you. First one is Ghost in the Attic. It's written for elementary school age kids, 4th and up. And it's actually touched it's touched the nerve with a lot of people, right? You know, as far as the idea of accepting each other and not judging a book by its cover, literally, in the story itself. My favorite thing about this is having Zoom meetings with kids on the West Coast with classrooms, and they read my book and they're excited to talk about it. So, and then I've always wanted to write a zombie book, so I wrote 2. One's got a sequel. It's Feasters: An Apocalyptic Tale, and Feasters: A Circle, and it's more than a zombie book. It's teenage vampires surviving in a zombie apocalypse. And how would they do that? But the story deals with the prejudice of minorities and the vampires being the minorities, and it doesn't really just sit with one race. It just has this race of vampires and how they were discriminated against and how they're overcoming all that. So it's award winning. I'm going to throw that out there. My first one. Mm-hmm. So it's exciting. But you can get that at Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and you can order through my website as well at solomonpetchers.com.
It's good stuff. And I remember when I read Ghost in the Attic, I blitzed through it in just a couple. I mean, it's a really fun read with like you said earlier, with a good message. And
my son just read it, and he was, Dad, Dad, you got to write a sequel. You got to
Tell me how cool that was. You
It
just
was
said
so
my
cool.
son
Yes,
just
so
read
cool.
my book. Yeah, my son doesn't want to read my book.
And I'm reading the first Feasters with him right now, and I was curious out because there's some fight scenes and a little bit of nothing gratuitous, but and he's just loving it. He's
That's
loving it. He's like,
cool.
Dad. So, and I'm working on my next book right now as we speak.
Oh my goodness. How about that? Well, and then I'll take my turn. My book is Stories of Edu Influence. It's real life stories. Everyone loves stories. It's a collection of stories from over 20 years of being in the classroom and the front office that illustrate the influence that we have regardless of our position. So from humble successes to epic failures, that's my book. And that's on Amazon, Stories of Edu Influence, or Barnes & Noble. And I am getting close to finishing my children's book.
I'm excited for that.
That's exciting.
Yeah, meeting met with my illustrator a little bit. We're recording this in the middle of January of 2022. My goal is May 2022.
Nice.
That is when I'm looking to publish. The draft is done. It's being edited right now. Illustrator is finishing the illustrations, and then we're going to format it. And we're going to do that self-publishing through Amazon. So you can look for that in May. So, well, gentlemen, this was fun.
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing your experience with anyone out there who is thinking about writing a book. And just do it. To borrow Nike's slogan, if you're thinking about it,
Do it.
just do it. And if it's 50 pages, it's 50 pages. If it's 100 pages, if it's 300, doesn't matter how long it is. Or like you said, Mike, maybe it's poetry. It doesn't have to be a narrative. It could be a collection of poetry. There's an ability now to actually get that out there where people can get their hands on it. So everyone listening, be sure to check out these guys' books because they are very, very good. Guys, thank you for sharing your expertise. For everyone listening, thank you for listening. Hope you got something out of this. Hopefully you've been inspired to open the computer and start writing. And we look forward to seeing what you come up with. If you haven't already subscribed, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, to Teaching Tales, in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. You can listen directly on my website at brentcoley.com. Be sure to check out Mike's podcast, Punk Rock Classrooms. Yeah, exactly. Punk Rock Classrooms. And until next time, everyone, thanks for listening. Have a good one.